Start your day with It's the Business. Here's Phil Dobbie.
Well, things are looking up for Royal Mail. They've upped their forward guidance and now they've announced the return of dividends. So is it all just good news from here?
Because actually, last year it said the future was very uncertain. It couldn't really give projections. And now, with this forecast of 700 million for the year, that's more than double this time last year.
Sussanah Street, Senior Investments and Markets Analyst at Hargreaves Lansdown, joins me to give her take on the Royal Mail later on. I can see a few downsides myself. We'll cover those too. And today, Deliveroo lists on the London Stock Exchange for the first time. Will it do well, or is this the worst possible time? Will they face some difficulties over workers' pay, for example?
Riders want the maximum ability to work flexibly, working for any platform, anytime they want, anywhere they are. And then finally, increasingly, riders do care about benefits.
So do those benefits they seek include sick pay and a minimum wage? Will Shu, CEO of Deliveroo, doesn't seem to have a problem with how they're paying their workers, but what about investors? Well, we'll pick apart the Deliveroo Prospectus today, which makes a rather spurious claim about the contestable market for their services. Plus, Bitcoin on PayPal, will it catch on? And COVID numbers in many parts of the world are going the wrong way, including the United States.
We have so much to look forward to, so much promise and potential of where we are, and so much reason for hope. But right now, I'm scared.
So numbers rising in the United States. Think about that if you're out in the crowds at the beach or the park today. It was the hottest March day for 50 years yesterday. It's the last day of March today, the 31st. It could be even hotter. Just a couple of days to get through before the long weekend. Good morning.
And now, it's the business. Making sense of it all with Phil Dobbie.
So Royal Mail doing particularly well. They're going to start paying dividends again. They announced yesterday a one-off dividend payment of 10 pence per share because their parcels delivery business has been going so well during lockdown. If it hadn't, you'd have to say there was something wrong, wouldn't you? I mean, basically, it has been handed to them on a plate. We are all stuck at home ordering stuff. They are still the biggest game in town. If they didn't do well, then there would be something wrong. So this one-off payment is going to be made on the 6th of September, but also a new dividend policy is going to be announced as well when they give their full year results on the 20th of May. Well, their operating profit for the 2020-21 financial year is expected to be around £700 million. Half of that is going to be their international business, their general logistics systems business, which is expected to grow significantly over the next few years. And that £700 million profit compares to a profit of £325 million in the previous year. So it's doubled. Here's one company doing very well out of COVID, but will we stick with it as we come out of lockdown? Will we send quite as many parcels? And what about that domestic business, which does face competition from other parcel carriers? And of course, it's got the letters business as well. They've got the universal services obligation. They have to deliver letters within a set time frame. They have to have the posties going out and delivering it all. You'd assume that is just going to keep on dwindling, wouldn't you? Plus, they've got a unionised workforce, which might be a good thing, but it's also expensive when you're competing against the gig economy. So how will they do with all of that? Well, we'll look at all of that today. Pitney Bowes has got the parcel shipping index. And they say Royal Mail has got 35% of all UK parcel deliveries, or they did before the pandemic. Amazon Logistics on 15%, Hermes on 10%, and the rest make up the other 40%. So it's a fairly competitive business, isn't it? In what is the third largest e-commerce market in the world after China and the United States. There's the United Kingdom. We're in third place. So what does the future really look like for Royal Mail? We're going to talk to Sussanah Street from Hargreaves Lansdown in a bit. To look at that, can all this new parcel business offset the decline in letters? Most letters, of course, are actually business-to-consumer letters. And you'd have to wonder about that as well. How long, now we've all got used to using computers, for how long do businesses actually need to send us stuff in the post? They actually did quite well on letter volumes. That was actually, they upped their guidance earlier this month, and that was because they sent more letters than had been envisaged because of the lockdown, because Auntie Josephine was writing because she's got nothing else. She's bored at home, so she's writing to everybody. But will that continue afterwards? I suspect not. They also, of course, announced 7-day parcel deliveries this month as well. But all of that's catching up with their competitors. But look, the share price went up over 2% yesterday. So obviously investors are happy that they're taking things in the right direction. So we'll talk about all of that with Sussanah Street, Senior Investment and Marketing and Markets Analyst, I should say, at Hargreaves Hargreaves Lansdown. We're going to do that shortly. Now, also today, Deliveroo are their first day on the London Stock Exchange. They're listing today. It's not been a good week for them. They've already downgraded their expectations this week. They were expecting to get up to 460 a share. Now they expect it's going to max out at 410, so the market cap could be 7.8 billion rather than 8.8 billion. So that's just a billion. Just a billion written off already this week, even before they list. So how will they do? Well, we did talk about this on Monday with Rodney. Rodney Hobson raised the point that I think is in everybody's mind in light of the Uber ruling. What about the workers? That is a question. Peter Stew and Peter Sellers, if you are of a certain vintage, you remember Peter Sellers asked that question 50 years ago.
What about the workers? What about the workers indeed, sir?
So yes, indeed. What about the workers? Well, this is Will Shue, CEO of Deliveroo, who seems to think workers for his company are well paid, so no problem there. Here he was on CNBC yesterday.
And in fact, the things that riders care about are really three things. One is obviously good pay. The second area is flexibility. Riders want the maximum ability to work flexibly, working for any platform, anytime they want, anywhere they are. And then finally, increasingly, riders do care about benefits. And we've been working with various governments around the world to offer both flexibility and benefits.
Do you think that you mentioned benefits, so I'm very interested in the benefits. Do you think your workers should get holiday pay and minimum wages?
My view is that benefits should be offered in a manner that's congruent with flexible work. I think that's the most important thing. The average Deliveroo rider works on our platform anywhere from 10 to 14 hours a week, and they value that flexibility very, very highly, and that is something that draws riders to the platform. So that part is incredibly important.
Right. Is it my imagination, or did he completely avoid the question there, which is the most important question about what happens if workers demand more money, or they demand to be categorized as workers with minimum pay and sick leave and all that sort of stuff. And even without the prospect of having to pay people more, he's not making any money. He needed a cash injection from Amazon to survive. It's still making a loss, even though its revenue last year increased by 55% during what you'd say would be exceptional times. We had no choice but to eat in. Even then, they're still making a loss. The prospectus says, this is an interesting read. It's a disturbing read, I'd say. Our mission is to build the definitive online food company. We want to be the platform that people turn to whenever they think about food. We aim to always provide customers with the best availability, selection, value and experience, whilst also building an emotional connection with our brand. Is it just me, or is that all very motherhoody? Now, look, I've written a prospectus. They are marketing documents. They are generally full of tripe. Well, the one I wrote was, anyway. But look, there's a few things in this prospectus which are more concerning than just the marketing bubble stuff. It should be noted, for example, that all the shares being issued are Class A shares, while Will Shue holds all the Class B shares, and that gives him 57.5% of all the voting rights. So he's taking the money and keeping control of the company. And the prospectus does say very clearly in the risks section, our business would be adversely affected if our rider model or approach to rider status and our operating practices were successfully challenged, or if changes in law require us to reclassify our riders as employees. Which doesn't look like a remote possibility, does it? I mean, it's a real possibility because a precedent has been set here. So that's a real concern. And also, there's no clear vision as to what they want to do with the money they're going to get from this listing. In his one page in the prospectus, Will Shue says, now we take the next big step in our company by allowing everyone to have a share in our future. That's why we are planning to take Deliveroo public here in London, the city where it all started, and we plan to offer our customers across the UK the chance to own a part of the business. We are proud to be enabling our customers to participate in a future float and have the chance to buy shares, just so long as he maintains control. He doesn't actually say what he's going to do with all this extra money. Where's the vision? We need this money because we're going to do what? What is the what is it that's going to take this business from a loss-making venture to a profitable venture? The only vision they offer is that there is a massive, underpenetrated, total addressable market. And even that is a concern because the numbers don't make any sense. They say the restaurant segment is worth £360 billion in the UK and that online is just 4% of all of that, which they say is highly underpenetrated compared to other industries. And they give the example of travel, which has 48% online penetration. Now, excuse me, there is an enormous failure of logic happening here. I might book my air ticket online, but I still get on a plane. I might book a restaurant meal online. In fact, very often I do through an app, but I still go to the restaurant to eat it. He is comparing apples with water buffalo or that Mexican walking fish. Certainly nothing that resembles an apple. These are completely different things. And this is how they are scoping the size of the market, by comparing how many people book online but actually physically get on a plane, and saying that is the same as people eating out rather than eating in at a restaurant. You see what I'm saying? There's no comparison here. So, oh dear. Anyway, we'll see how it goes. It will have been listed probably by the time that you're listening to this, but however it goes at the onset, it's what happens next, and maybe more people will go back and read the prospectus, which is a real worry if you ask me. But of course, you should always seek advice from a professional, from an expert, rather than listening to a guy prattling on his daily podcast. But, you know, I don't know. It all seems a bit amateur. The prospectus, looking through it today.
It's the business, making sense of it all.
With Phil Dobby.
So how long will this blasted COVID-19 be with us? Well, ages seems to be the answer in one way or another. The New Scientist did a poll of infectious disease experts this week, and 52 of them were asked when they would personally expect to eat in a pub or go for a drink or go to a cafe or a restaurant. 3/4 of them said that's not going to happen until July at the earliest. 82% of them won't be inviting anyone into their home until July. They might just be antisocial, of course, and don't want to see anyone come to their house. They might be just using it as an excuse. But July, wait till then. 65% said they won't be going to a cinema or theatre until the last few months of the year. In fact, 40% said it's going to be next year or the year after before they finally go to the movies or go to the theatre. And most say it's going to be next year or the year after before they shake hands with people outside their bubble. More than half expect face coverings will be in guidance right through to next year. When will it all end? Will we ever hug anyone ever again? Well, what is concerning perhaps is the report in the Times yesterday that government money is funding the development of software that would allow customers to pubs to have their faces scanned. I guess not just pubs, it would be theatres, restaurants, having your face scanned when you enter that venue, and that data, that face being matched against data showing whether you've been vaccinated or not, against some sort of national database. I mean, let's hope not. I mean, Boris had previously said he was against the idea of vaccine passports. Then he said, well, maybe it should be up to the landlord to decide how they control people entering their pubs. It seems a big leap then, doesn't it, to then say, well, there's going to be some sort of compulsory facial check against some national database. That is very Communist Party of China. Let's hope it doesn't end up there. Meanwhile, 55% of us have had the virus or have had the vaccine. 55% of us, in other words, have got the antibodies to the virus, which means, you know, one of those two things. It's as high as 60% in northwest England. They're going much slower, of course, on the virus in the vaccines in Europe, and a bit slower in the US, where cases are now rising. Dr. Rochelle Walensky is the director of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention in the United States. She gave this impassioned speech from the White House at the start of the week.
When I first started at CDC about 2 months ago, I made a promise to you. I would tell you the truth, even if it was not the news we wanted to hear. Now is one of those times when I have to share the truth, and I have to hope and trust you will listen. I'm going to pause here. I'm going to lose the script, and I'm going to reflect on the recurring feeling I have of impending doom. We have so much to look forward to, so much promise and potential of where we are, and so much reason for hope. But right now, I'm scared.
Wow. impending doom. And since she gave that impassioned speech, the numbers have continued to rise. 65,000 new daily cases each day now on average in the United States. That is up from 55,000 just a week or two ago. And her concern is that the US is going to go the way of much of Europe. Germany's case numbers, for example, they've gone from 8,000 cases a day to 17,000 in a month. Italy from 12,000 to 22,000. But it is starting to ease off a bit, perhaps now as the warmer weather arrives. But will the US follow? Well, yes, she says they will.
The trajectory of the pandemic in the United States looks similar to many other countries in Europe, including Germany, Italy, and France. Looked like just a few weeks ago. And since that time, those countries have experienced a consistent and worrying spike in cases. We are not powerless. We can change this trajectory of the pandemic, but it will take all of us recommitting to following the public health prevention strategies consistently while we work to get the American public vaccinated.
That is the worry, isn't it? Same here as well. Will people be a bit reckless because they sense that the end for lockdowns is near, but it is going to take more time, isn't it? Meanwhile, in Spain this last week, this. There were 15,000 people crammed into a rock concert in Spain earlier in the week. They'd all been tested on the way in. Everyone wore masks throughout as well. But it's going to be interesting, isn't it, to see whether it works or not, or whether we see a spike in cases in the next few days as a result of all of this. Because, if it hasn't created any follow-on effects from that, that would mean perhaps young people can go out and have a good time. Maybe vaccinated older people could go out to rock concerts as well, if that's their thing, unless they'd rather be watching Countdown with a nice cup of tea, which is probably the case, probably a lot safer. But young people, maybe we should just separate out all the young people for a while, send them off to, Ibiza would be the obvious place. Put them all on Ibiza for the rest of the year till this whole thing's finished. Nobody over 30 would be allowed in. Nobody on the island would be allowed out. It would be a bit like a party island version of Logan's Run. Now, there is an idea for a TV show just there. I want my cut if that one becomes the next big thing on TV. Love Island, but you can't leave. UK's GDP numbers are out today. These are the final numbers. The provisional numbers are expected to be downgraded a little bit. This is for the final quarter of the last year. So we expect the economy to have fallen 7.87% in that final quarter. We know it was a bad year, don't we? Things can only get better. In the United States, consumer confidence shot up yesterday. The Conference Board has this long-running survey. It went from 90.4 in February up to 109.7 in March, which is a 12-month high, a post-pandemic high. So there is this confidence, but is this the confidence that is creating the cases to increase, as we've just heard? Canada also pushing ahead. The Conference Board of Canada expects the Canadian economy to grow 5.8% in 2021, the highest since 2007. When there was a big global commodities boom that helped their GDP rocket up. But this time, of course, it's rising after a rather big fall. And there is a concern in Canada and many parts of the world that house prices are rising too much as well. They're running too hot. There was a concern in Canada that prices were already overpriced because people leverage more in Canada than most other parts of the world. That was before the pandemic. This is only going to make it worse, isn't it? Are we going to reach peak house prices, and are the walls going to come tumbling down? That could be the next consequence of all of this. Joe Biden gives his address in Philadelphia today, his 10-year infrastructure plan. Nobody is quite sure what the magic figure is going to be. Is it going to be 3 trillion or 4 trillion? What's a trillion between friends? And how much of it is going to come from tax? And how much of it is going to be coming from piling on extra government debt? Some are saying it's going to be 4 trillion, and 3.5 trillion of that is going to come from tax hikes. That is a major wealth tax coming if that is the case, and that is certainly going to hit share prices if that is the if that's the upshot of today. But then I've also seen figures that actually it's only going to be 2.25 trillion. So whatever there is, whatever the numbers, the higher they are, the higher the numbers. Then if it's more government debt, that's going to affect bond prices. That's going to there's going to be more inflation fears because people are thinking there's too much money. or it's going to be higher tax fears, which is going to worry the share market. Whatever happens, something will change today as Biden gives his speech in Pittsburgh later on. Look, before we go back to the Royal Mail, Bitcoin on PayPal. They just announced this yesterday. I'm sure Bitcoin users will point to this as an example of how Bitcoin is now a full-blown currency because you can spend it. It's not just this vehicle used for speculation, but it's not really a currency, is it really? It's just a substitute for whichever sovereign currency you're going to use. So if you buy a book on Amazon and it costs £20, well, at today's exchange rate, and this is another problem with Bitcoin, how do you work out how much you're paying, particularly when you're buying small items? A £20 book on Amazon, that would be about 0.0004 Bitcoins. I think I've got the right number of zeros in there. But let's make it easier. Say I buy a car on Amazon, and that costs around £50,000. So Bitcoin's a bit lower than that, but in the next, give it another half an hour or so, it'll probably be up to £50,000. So the car manufacturer might say, well, okay, it's one Bitcoin for my rather expensive car, and they might hang on to that Bitcoin as an investment for a while, but most of it they will want to return into pounds or US dollars. So what happens when Bitcoin halves in value? If one Bitcoin is £25,000, is the car manufacturer going to say, well, okay, it's still only one Bitcoin? Of course not, because they want to get their money back in sterling. They're going to adjust the exchange rate. They're going to say it's 2 Bitcoins for the car. If Bitcoin doubles in value, it might halve the Bitcoin cost of the car because the car will be priced in pounds, not Bitcoin. So until everyone is using Bitcoin, and, when that happens, that's a sorry day because sovereign currencies will disappear. Central banks will have no control and we are in a world of no good. So until then, Bitcoin on PayPal, it will always be changed. The exchange rate will always be changed according to the sovereign currency. It's just another way Bitcoin users are convincing themselves that they're building a workable currency. So buy Bitcoin is their message. Which, I mean, it is great that Bitcoin holders are so enthusiastic, aren't they, about the currency. They want everyone to buy it. They're so enthusiastic. And, of course, what goes wrong? The more enthusiastic they are, the more people buy it, the more it goes up. Marvelous, isn't it? But Bitcoin in PayPal, it's just for show, isn't it? Because always the deliverer of the service or the product will always translate it to their sovereign currency based on the exchange rate for PayPal. Makes no difference whatsoever. Am I ranting a bit too much today? I suspect I am. Look, let's get back to the Royal Mail. Where does the Royal Mail go from here? Onwards and upwards, I think. That's certainly the view of Sussanah Street, Senior Investment and Markets Analyst at Hargreaves Lansdown. So do you think things get better or worse for Royal Mail after we come out of COVID, the restrictions ease, because we will be shopping more, won't we? So, we could see parcel traffic fall as a result of that, couldn't we?
There is obviously always that risk, but I suppose that many in the business are thinking, look, we are now geared up for this accelerated shift to online shopping that we've seen, and the reading across the retail sector is that isn't going to unfurl anytime soon. In fact, many more people have got used to the ease of browsing the web and buying so many different purchases, from clothes to essential items to DIY, from the comfort of their own sofas. So that is the expectation is that it isn't going to fully unravel. There may be a little bit of a drop-off in demand, but certainly it's been hugely impressive the way Royal Mail has managed to deal with this shift, because actually last year it said the future was very uncertain. It couldn't really give projections. And now with this forecast of 700 million for the year, that's more than double this time last year, 325 million. So that's a very, very impressive performance. And certainly we saw that real takeoff in the performance, in the numbers of parcels being delivered by November, and then also we've seen a takeoff in the share price of Royal Mail.
So did they hold their own in terms of market share? Because I'm sure this has been a good year for everybody, hasn't it?
Well, people have been queuing out the door. I'm sure you've seen post offices up and down the country.
Which is why I don't go to the post office and try and use somebody else. So, you can use that argument both ways, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly, it's meant that there's been a lot of business for everybody, but certainly Royal Mail has capitalised on this increased demand. So much so that it's trialling a Sunday delivery service and also pickups from the door. It's introduced that as well to try and keep up with actually some of its competitors' operations. It would say that it's got a huge footprint. It certainly has, and obviously has as well. It's very key and very at the fore in terms of sending letters as well. And actually, there was a real drop off in letter sending through the pandemic initially, but then actually there was a bit of a renaissance later in the year. So that's a kind of interesting trend to be aware of as well.
I wonder whether that could be that is just a sign of how bored we all got. It's like, oh my God, I'm so bored now. I'm even going to write a letter. I wonder whether that one's going to last particularly long. But I mean,
possibly.
You mentioned yourself playing catch up, because there is a bit of that going on, isn't there? I mean, you look at their competitors. I mean, they've got more than half the market share in parcels when it comes to volume. And that's why I was asking about whether that's getting chipped away at or potentially could, because the competitors, I mean, Sunday delivery for parcels, you go, well, of course. And then pick up from home, you go, well, yes, of course. And in fact, they've got this higher market share in terms of volume, but not quite as much in terms of revenue. And that has to be, I'd assume, in the past, because if you've got a big parcel, you don't want to take it down to the post office. And so those people who will pick up have been getting that slice of the business, but they're doing that now as well. So they are trying to catch up with their competitors. The other thing, though, is what about the smart stuff, like those providers who tell you where the delivery driver is, so you don't have to be home all the time. There's some of these have come in with better technology, haven't they, than Royal Mail's been stuck with.
It's really had to make huge transformations across the business, and in the past, Royal Mail has been criticised for not being nimble. It's certainly shown over the past year that it's been very fast-footed in this adjustment to this huge demand. It's also gearing up for long-term increased demand with a huge parcel delivery, parcel sorting office in Birmingham, and has really revamped the whole infrastructure to meet this. So it would also point to the fact that its international business is particularly strong, really the jewel in the crown, GLS. And the guidance for GLS, the international business, over the next 5 years is really eye-catching with strong revenue growth, which really will be supported in the growth of e-commerce and potentially acquisitions too, some of perhaps its competitors. And really, in fact, its international business is going great guns, even better than the UK business at the moment. The problem is, in the UK, there has been years of underinvestment, and so there will be more capital expenditure needed to make up the shortfall. So that is likely to eat into shareholder returns for months to come. But certainly, it's been very encouraging from Royal Mail, and they really have turned in quite a good performance this year.
Well, if they manage that well, if they say, look, we do need to play catch up in terms of our investment in our infrastructure, then I imagine that that's not going to be too detrimental to share prices so long as the messaging's there. What about the other side, though? So the technology is one side. The other side is the people. They obviously have had a lot of industrial action. They would, the problem of being a legacy provider. So are their labour costs in line with the competitors, or are they still going to have a disadvantage there?
Well, obviously, Royal Mail would say that, in fact, they offer better terms and conditions than some of the competitors. And I think that's increasingly a concern among investors about just how well the workforce is treated. And certainly there have been industrial disputes in the past, but there have been agreements reached recently which have definitely smoothed the waters. But some courier firms continue to use more of a self-employment model, and certainly Royal Mail has steered away from that. So, yeah, I mean, obviously its labour cost because of that will be higher, but then again, it will gain more respect for trying to treat its workers in a more respectful way. And actually, I think people during the pandemic have very much valued the postmen and women who have trudged up and down the streets delivering all of our essentials. So I think in terms of reputation, that's certainly no bad thing either.
But a lot of that cost, I mean, the posties that we see, there's an Australian name coming out now. I lived in Australia too long calling them posties. What do we call them? Postmen and postwomen, I guess.
Although I kind of call them posters as well.
You call them posties as well. All right, okay, well, get away with that one then. So do we, we see them every day, of course, but they very often don't deliver anything for us. It's the van that pulls up later on in the day that's really got the stuff that we're really after, because there's less money in letters these days and declining volumes. And I imagine this is, you've still got the flat expense. I know they've been trying to cut down the costs of running post offices by moving them into WH Smiths or anywhere where there's a bit of space, but they've still got that universal service obligation they've got to meet, haven't they, in terms of delivering letters and being able to get people to be able to go and post letters as well. That is increasingly going to become a drag on the business, isn't it? An expense for which there is very little revenue coming in.
Yes, well, it is a drag on the business to some extent. But then I think what there is, the expectation is that the growth and dramatic growth in parcels will help offset that and bring more revenues back to the business. And I think as well that people do still really value the fact that, with one stamp you can send a letter right across the country. So there is certainly a lot of people who do still very much appreciate that. So I don't think that's going to be going away anytime soon. So yes, it's challenging, but obviously Royal Mail is distinct from the post office. The post office that operates the actual shops where you post the letters from, and Royal Mail is very much in the delivery of those items. And certainly they have made a huge investment in for the future to make sure that it can keep up with demand and make sure that it really is well placed to capitalise on this dramatic shift to e-commerce that we've seen.
So I'm wondering, from an investor's point of view, you'd be wrong, wouldn't you, to treat Royal Mail as a utility, because it's got more growth potential than power providers or even telecom companies, because they've sort of done the job of wiring us all up. They might want to speed up connections, which will be marginal extra revenue, but a big cost behind it. So good old fashioned parcels, as we cocoon ourselves at home. I can see what you're saying. There's only upside, isn't there?
I think it's the growth in the international business that really does present lots of opportunities. And certainly it does seem as though Royal Mail really is gearing up to capitalise on those. And I do think that at the moment it's going to stay really as the jewel in the crown at the moment. And we'll probably see the UK business trying to catch up to those levels of growth that GLS is certainly striding forward with at the moment. So I do think that there is certain growth potential going forward, not just in the UK market. All
right, great. Well, thanks for keeping us up to date on all of that. Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you.
And look, my bad as well for lumping the post office together with the Royal Mail, which is the way it works in Australia. Hence I was confused. But basically they are, we've got... And my bad for lumping the post office with the Royal Mail. They are, of course, quite separate, and the post office still fundamentally in public hands, which is I'm more used to the Australian situation where they are lumped together and both in public hands and not doing very well because of it. Mind you, it is very cheap to send a letter over there. But does that matter too much when you don't send so many? Look, tomorrow, how green is your pension plan? And how are you doing personally to help the planet? Do you choose lower prices in the supermarket, for example, even if you know that choice is detrimental to the world we live in? I'll be tackling all of that with environmental journalist Lucy Seigel on the podcast tomorrow. Very quickly, the papers this morning. Keep your cool, says the Daily Mirror, after the hottest March day since 1968. And we've got another one coming up today. Well, it could be even hotter today. The Daily Express, hot but not bothered. Don't blow it now, warns Hancock as thousands flock to the beaches and the parks. The Daily Star, shiny ball spotted in sky. Shiny ball of fire. They're talking about the sun, of course. The Daily Mail, same approach. Pictures of a crowded park. Some people think it's all over. That is, they're the tabloids. We really don't have time to cover much of the rest of the papers, but you get the gist. The government's race report, that's on a few front pages this morning, a report that's rejected claims that Britain is a racist country. Well, it is a bit, isn't it? But not institutionally racist, says this report. And also stories of jabs. We can't basically up production enough to be totally self-sufficient, says the eye. But maybe a nasal spray is just around the corner so that we could roll it out a lot faster and we wouldn't have to stick pins in ourselves. That would be nice, wouldn't it, as well? That's it for today. Have a great day. Enjoy the sunshine if you can get out into it. I'll see you tomorrow morning.
It's the Business with Phil Dobbie. Listen online at its.business or wherever good